Here is Bennie Carollo, formerly of TYT. How you holding up, Bennie? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty tired though. You know, being a main character on the internet's a little bit of a trip.
Yeah, it looks like Gavin's popped back on here. How you doing?
What's up? What's up? How's it going, Bennie? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join Zac and I on the Vanguard. So glad to be here with you. So excited to meet and to hear a little bit about what you've been up to in the last couple days. But yeah, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, we did a little bit of a story yesterday about your video talking about your decision to leave the Young Turks. Do you want to just give our audience some of the context behind your decision and talk a little bit about why you ultimately did decide to exit TYT?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, and it kind of like, I mean, obviously, it all started like months ago when like Ana Kasparian started like freaking out about the whole like birthing person thing. You know, and I kind of saw things going in a direction. I like tried to reach out, and like I ended up having that like phone call with Cenk and like trying to like have a conversation about like trans people in sports because they were saying some not great stuff, and like people started alerting me to like different things that they were saying and doing, where it's like, hey, they're really missing the mark here. And I tried to do some like course corrections, but like it just kind of didn't really go anywhere. And like unfortunately, it kind of like escalated to the point where like then you have like, you know, Ana Kasparian like talking about how she thinks that Jesse Singal isn't transphobic when like his work is literally cited in a bunch of anti-trans legislation, and he's like one of the people like leading the campaigns like spreading misinformation about like HRT for trans youth. And like between like Ana like, you know, being willing to engage with that misinformation and like spreading some of it, and with like the things that Cenk has been saying about like the way he was talking about like trans people in sports and stuff, kind of just like really revealed like, I mean, to me at least, just this mentality that like being trans is like this extra thing that's just like some sort of like bonus thing and not just like who trans people are, you know what I mean? And so like it just kind of got a little bit frustrating in the way that like, I don't know, because like I don't know, like when Cenk went off about like, oh, you know, these radical activists and things like that, and like calling people idiots and stuff like that, like it's hard not to see that and be like, okay, but that's like about me, right? Like this is literally information that I've told you, and then you're going on a rant about it, and you're like, you know, yelling at like, oh, you're betraying people and this, that, or the other thing. And it's like, okay, how am I not supposed to read that? Is like, at least that's on some level being like about me personally. And then like, yeah, so it just got to be too much. And like me being there as a trans person, like to some degree lends legitimacy, right, to those claims, right? Because it's like, oh, well, they've got a trans person on the network. And so like you know, like I've spent a lot of time like bugging out about this, to be honest, like talking to my partners a lot about like, hey, like this is just like a lot, and like stressing out about it, and just like taking the psychic damage every day from like doing the content that I do, which is like very much like, you know, trying to combat the transphobia that the Republicans are doing, and then having to deal with that on the other end. It just got to be too much. And it's just like, no, I can't deal with this. This is too much. And me being here is like a halfway, like, sorry, tacit endorsement of like the things that they're saying. And I just kind of can't have that. And so like, I just had to leave because it's like, what, it doesn't seem like they're like gonna like move in the right direction. Because like, I mean, the thing that's like most dangerous about it is like they'll say like, oh yeah, look at our track record, we support trans people, but like also it's like, yeah, if you say you support like, you know, trans people being able to get like hormones, like medical care and stuff like that, but then you're willing to like, you know, fear monger about like uncertainty regarding like hormones for trans youth, then you really aren't, are you? Right? Because, and one of the things I kept trying to get across is like, no, look, like hormones for trans youth is literally just puberty, right? That's what it is. And it's like, yeah, puberty has risks, right? If puberty has risks for cisgender people, just like it does with transgender people. And so like the whole idea of like hormones for trans youth is to make sure that they're going through the puberty that they are the most comfortable with. Because every kid should be able to go through the puberty that they are the most comfortable with at the normal puberty age. And like sort of not seeing it like that, I think it's just like a gigantic mistake. Because like, yeah, there's going to be permanent effects. That's kind of like the whole point, actually. Yeah, like there's going to be risks. Every puberty is going to have risk. But like, in a weird way, it's a little bit less risky to go through a trans puberty because you're going to have doctors checking up on you on a regular basis. Whereas like most people go through puberty without those, you know what I mean? And so like, all that is to say, like, it just kind of got to be too much. And it was just like, they're putting out misinformation. And if Ana Kasparian is really going to trust Jesse Singal, then like, that's just like, Jesse Singal is very obviously a bad faith actor in this situation. He's very obviously spreading like anti-trans propaganda. And if you're willing to accept him as like some sort of like, you know, trusted source, then like, I just can't be on a network that even has the potentiality of like bringing somebody like that on or like using that person's information for something. Cause it's just actively harmful.
Benny, can I ask you, what was your day-to-day like working for TYT? Did you go into a studio for them, or were you working remotely?
It was all remote. It was all remote. Like I did everything like in my little home studio that I have.
Gotcha. So there were no like interactions between you and like other hosts on the network, like in person very often?
No. Everything was like virtual, and it was all very like honestly not like a super ton, like to be entirely honest. I work from home. Like sometimes I would chat with the other hosts about like random stuff like before or after like a show or whatever, but like it was pretty much just that.
Interesting. Well, the weirdest about your video, in my opinion, and your story to me was the fact that you talked about on that phone call with Cenk Uygur, you offered pretty politely, from what I could tell, like, hey, let's just have a conversation about this. We can do it on TYT. That way I can provide some of the pushback that a lot of your critics are voicing towards some of your recent talking points and opinions on trans stuff. And I don't know if you mentioned the crime stuff and the defund stuff too. I don't know if that's something you also wanted to chat with them or debate them about, but they've been trying to characterize all of their critics as like this woke mob hell-bent on canceling them, and all of these unfair, dishonest, bad faith actors that just want to punish them for having a different opinion, and just want to punish them for not thinking the same way about the stuff as the rest of the progressive left does. But the fact of the matter is that almost everyone that I've seen, from yourself, Benny, to our friend of the show, Olayemi Lauren, who literally did go on there and debate, pretty much everyone has offered to have a polite discussion and to hash out these conversations in a reasonable, mature, adult way. I think pretty much everyone on the left, I imagine yourself included, is more than open to robust discourse on the left. I think we all understand the fact that as leftists, we are independent thinkers, and sometimes we're going to come down on a slightly different position or a slightly different way of looking at things. And that's the beauty of this space, right? We can hash out these differences of opinion. We can have these tough conversations, and we can hopefully, express solidarity. We can express understanding, and, all understand that we're in this together and that we need to come together to talk and to discuss. But from Ana, it seems like, and Cenk, but mostly from Ana, it just seems like she's hell-bent on mischaracterizing her critics as bad faith actors who just want to cancel her. And I think that's the problem that Zac and I have, and that a lot of people have with her, because as we've talked about on the show, so many people on the left, so many progressive commentators, ourselves included, sometimes have hot takes. We sometimes have unpopular opinions. But when you have a hot take or an unpopular opinion, you have to accept the fact that there's going to be pushback. There's going to be backlash from people that feel differently. There's going to be backlash, especially if you're talking about a community that you're not a part of, and you're trying to tell that community what's best for them, what's best for their movement. Of course, you're going to receive often somewhat aggressive pushback from people that are in that community. That just goes with the territory. And for you not to just take that on the chin and move on like an adult, like a mature person who's, been in this industry for years now, is mind-blowing to me. And that's why this smells fishy to me. That's why this smells of a right-wing grift, because we get criticized all the time. We get called out. We get, pushed back on when we say something that's unpopular to our audience. What happens when we experience that is that we don't come out here and pretend like we're leaving the left. We don't pretend like we're the only sane ones left. We don't pretend like everyone else is crazy and that we're the only reasonable progressives around. And that's what Ana Kasparian is doing. That's why I think it smells so fishy. And I was just wondering if you have any comment on that, especially as one of the people that did try to politely, reasonably debate Cenk and Ana in a mature and productive fashion.
I think honestly, the question of like, oh, is this a grift? Like, to me, is kind of like irrelevant, right? Because like at the end of the day, like Anna is just saying the things, right? Like Anna is obviously like consuming a lot of right-wing content, getting a lot of talking points from them, and like unfortunately repeating them. Like a perfect example was like she had said on the air at some point something about like, you know, trans kids getting hormones because doctors were afraid of being transphobic. That's just literally not true. Like anybody who knows anything about politics should know that if that did happen, it would be a national news story, right? Dylan Mulvaney having her face on one beer can was enough to be like a news storm for like 2 months. So like if there was some kid out there that had their gender transed because some woke doctor, we would have heard about it. Like, and not only would we have heard about it, but it would still be
We would have heard about
national
nothing else.
news, right? It would have been everywhere. Everybody would have known the name of the doctor and the patient and the clinic where it was. We would know all of the details, right? Like the New York Times has been trying to ask the transgender question for like a year now of like, why are all these kids transing their genders? Oh my goodness gracious, we need to get to the bottom of this, right? And like fueling this like right-wing paranoia about like trans people. And so like that just isn't happening. And like when I pointed out that to Cenk and I talked about this in the video, he was like, well, I could see it happening. And it's like, okay, but I couldn't and you couldn't. And so like, does it, I don't think it matters whether or not it's a grift, right? I don't think it matters whether or not it's like, you know, at the end of the day, you're just saying these things that are literally untrue and very harmful and like propagate like unfortunately a lot of misinformation that the political right is using right now to demonize and villainize trans people. And that really is what's at the heart of it. So like, is it Ana Kasparian's personal belief? Is it Ana Kasparian trying to do like a right-wing grift? I think that is irrelevant on some level because fundamentally where's the difference in terms of like the material reality that people experience as a result?
As you know, as a trans woman, Benny, you know, and somebody who's been a long time member of the progressive community, you know what I mean? Were you obviously, you know, it sucks to see people that you would think would be like your allies in a battle like this, you know, kind of fall by the waysides. But I guess I'm wondering, are you surprised by this? I mean, did this shock you? I mean, I've seen some, you know, we've followed the Young Turks relentlessly on this podcast. You know, I've seen some bad, cringy right-wing takes from Cenk that just kind of like root him in a little bit more of like, I imagine his like youthful conservative ideology, to put it mildly. You know, but I always thought, you know, for the most part, deep down, this is a good guy. Like he cares about people. And it just seems like the emphasis that they always have is on something that, you know, dehumanizes or otherizes the trans community. And, you know, would kind of unravel that, you know, instinct. You know, that, you know, deep down, he's just a compassionate guy. I'm just wondering, were you surprised by all of this? Did this take you aback? You know, obviously you said that you'd, you know, seen some of this coming over the last couple of months, but I don't know, when it came, was it like, holy shit, like, I can't believe this is happening? Or like, God damn it, like, I kind of knew that this, you know, boot would drop?
So yes and no. Let me put it like this. So like, no, I wasn't expecting it in terms on the front of transphobia, but yes, on the front of like, look, being an internet person is tough, right? Being an internet person is tough because you're going to have a lot of people that criticize you, especially the bigger you are, you're going to deal with this, right? Like you're going to have a lot of people that criticize you and sometimes they're real and sometimes they're not real, right? Sometimes it's a real criticism, sometimes it's not real criticism. And it's a lot to parse out, like, what are the criticisms that I should listen to? And when you get to a certain point, like, you know, where Anna and Cenk are on Twitter, like, they just have like a constant stream of people who are criticizing them for like kind of silly reasons, right? And then they also have people who are criticizing them for like very real and legitimate reasons. And so the problem becomes when you're like not deciphering between those two and engaging with them in like a productive way and asking yourself, okay, where am I missing a mark here? And so when you're facing like a dog pile, right? Like, I mean, and like, this is like, maybe part of this is just like them not being like, I guess, like of the internet in the same way that like millennials and Zoomers are, where it's like, look, if you're the main character on Twitter, what is the number one thing you should never do, right? You should never post through it. Don't post through it, right? Like take a step back for like a second, right? And don't be like posting through it. And like, they were like, Anna especially was just posting through it, and it's like, girl, please
Malding.
stop. You're posting, like, you stop posting through this, like, you like take a step back for like a minute, like. And so, like, especially if it's people that, like, you know, are like supposed to be on the same side, and it can come like a particular way. And so really it just becomes this game of like, how do you know what criticism is real and what's not real? And then how do you take the stuff that is real in good faith and engage with it and like process it internally, not necessarily on the air, but sometimes on the air, right? So that you can like sort of measure where you need to be. But like, unfortunately, because they have got like a lot of the like Ben Shapiro's and Dave Rubin's and like Jimmy Dore's out there that like criticize them in silly ways, like then they like kind of have this tendency to think that everybody is like doing that, right? And like, it's kind of like a little bit of like clout brain where you're just kind of like posting through things instead of engaging with it as like the topic that it actually is.
Die a hero or live long enough to become a villain.
Yeah, so it feels a little bit like that. So like, all that is to say, like, look, Cenk is stubborn, right? Like Cenk is a very stubborn person. I don't even think that he would deny that about himself. So like, if he gets like corrected on something, it's going to take him a while to like come along. And sometimes he's just going to dig his heels in and double down and double down. And like that is like, sometimes it's useful to be like a stubborn person that's, no, I'm going to dig my heels in and stand up for what I think is right. But like, if you're missing the mark, then it can become problematic, and you can like push away people who are like well-meaning and trying to be helpful to you. And like, I think this was like kind of very much an instance of that. At least with Cenk. With Anna, it's a little bit different because Anna seems to be like very directly engaging with like right-wing content that is like very overtly harmful. She's literally said that she's learned new things from Jesse Singal.
She said she would rather talk to Ben Shapiro than any leftist.
Yeah. And so like, stuff like that is just like dangerous, because it's like, I don't know, like, if we want to get philosophical with it, we could play this game of like, you know, more like moral envy, David Graeber's theory of moral envy, which is like, how dare you act like you're a better person than me by being a better person than me, right? Which is like,
that's exactly what it is, though. That's right on the money.
Yeah. So, and it's like, and then it's tough because like, what do you deal with in that situation where it's like, hey, you're being corrected in this way, and like your response is to double down. And like, it's a big thing with like the transphobia pipeline, where people are sort of unwilling to process their hangups about gender, because like, that's one of those things where it's like both political and personal, right? Where like, everybody has their own personal understanding of their gender identity. And like, so when you hear something like, hey, you know, gender is like a colonial construct, at least as it exists in our like, you know, patriarchal society, gender is very much a colonial construct that has like racist implications, sexist implications, and like all of these other things like layered behind it. And so when you think about gender, you need to understand all of these different layers and then reconceptualize your gender for yourself within that new lens. And so it is like a political thing, but also like, it's deeply personal, because everybody has obviously their own gender identity. And so like, straight up, like, to hear something like that is going to put people on a path of like, okay, what does this mean about me? And like that's one of those things can kind of be like a little bit tough. And like, I get it. But also like, if your reaction is to just be like, no, I'm rejecting all of this new information, then you start going down a pipeline and double downing on like, ultimately, what is a white supremacist conception of like masculinity and femininity and like gender across the board. And so like, yeah, like, that's just kind of,
yeah, to just reaffirm, you know, the point you made. I think that's exactly why she does run into the, you know, we always call it the warm embrace of the right wing, because those people are never going to call her a bigot. And that's what she fears most, likely because I think that there is, you know, probably a little bit of truth to there being some like, I don't know if it's correct to call it like hate in her heart or something that's going on deep down inside of her that, you know, forces her, you know, to respond this way. And then, you know, also embed with the right wing because, you know, her biggest fear is to be a bigot. And, you know, they reassure her and assuage her of that while she is, you know, going out and parroting bigotry. It's really, really quite a sight to behold. Pardon the day or multi-day late fireworks going off in the background.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, there is just like a big element of like, everybody likes to think of themselves as a good person, right? Everybody likes to think of themselves as a good person. And being labeled something like transphobic or racist or sexist or whatever, people know that those are bad things, right? Even people who are like avowedly racist know that like on some level racism is that's a bad thing, that you're not supposed to be racist, right? And so like if it's like, hey, this is a racist thing that you're saying, or hey, this is a transphobic thing that you're saying, this is a misogynistic thing that you're saying, like people will take that as like an identity attack against them of a good person. They're like, oh, that means that you're not a good person. When like ultimately you should just be like evaluating that and be like, why am I being called transphobic in this moment? Like what is precipitating this? And like, do I need to change? Is this a real criticism or is this a fake criticism? And then how do I engage with that in a way to like improve in this way, so that instead of like, and this is why, like, I don't know, when I tell people like, it's like, look, you shouldn't think of yourself as a good person. You should think of yourself as somebody who's trying to be a good person. And like, when you do that, then you start to realize that like, you know, if somebody calls you out on something, that it's not an attack on identity of who you are. It's like, hey, this is an opportunity to grow. But like, once again, being an online personality is difficult. And like, when you have like a ton of people who are like constantly criticizing you for fake reasons, sometimes like it becomes difficult to separate those things with each other. And like, that's just like a whole entire thing. And unfortunately, it kind of seems to be going that way. And I don't know. It's just really easy to turn everything to grand narratives. Like I don't know, like what Anna said about me like last night on the show, I thought was kind of silly. Like we'll just move past her like accidentally misgendering me and go into like the like her statement about like, oh yeah, you know, it seems like people on the internet convinced her to do this. And it's like, no, I'm like my own person. I'm like a grown adult actually, and I can just make my own decisions, right? And like, this is something that I actually have spent like months talking about like my partners with, and like, hey, I'm scared that like Anna's going down this pipeline and what it means for me in the network, of like, it's an endorsement of these things for me to continue to be there. And so like, this is something that I've talked about with like all of my partners with. This is something I've talked about with like my close personal friends, and like, you know, like, and like, yeah, I did have a lot of random people on the internet that were asking me how I was holding up with the things Anna was saying. I've also had people who are saying like, hey, why are you still with TYT? Like, and like had like I've just the whole spectrum of things, right? I've had some people say, no, Ben, you should stick it out, right? And so like I get all that. Like, you know, once again, I'm like an internet person. I'm gonna get all sides in my DM requests, telling me all sorts of things. But like, you know, I'm a grown woman. I can make decisions for myself. It wasn't that the
Of
internet
course.
like, you know, it wasn't that Twitter like pressured me into it. And that was kind of one of the things that was really disheartening, just like this idea that like I don't have like agency for myself, which is something that a lot of trans women unfortunately deal with, because one of the main narratives that Republicans are pushing right now is that like all these trans women are just being like tricked into it by the internet. They're being tricked into like taking estrogen and like being really hot, you know?
Right. Oh yeah. It's so infantilizing that Anna would say that about you, as if you're just susceptible to whatever the internet pressure campaign wants you to do, and you didn't just arrive at that conclusion because it's what you felt comfortable with, you being the employee of TYT. And it's also, you know, interesting. It kind of reminds me of the fact that when Ana Kasparian joined TYT all those years ago, she was joining a network that was founded and hosted by a denier of the Armenian genocide. And she was joining a network that was named after the group of Turks that committed the Armenian genocide. So at the time, she probably felt like she had to swallow some of her pride, some of her dignity in order to work for Cenk. And she probably just feels like, well, of course, Bennie would do the same thing, just like I did. It's probably a little bit, you know, crazy to her that you were able to just say, no, I'm not comfortable doing this. I'm not a slave to you guys. I can go do my own thing. I don't need the Young Turks. I don't have to work for this organization that disrespects my community. That's ridiculous. So I think that took a lot of bravery on your part. And I think that's ridiculous of Anna to characterize your decision in that way and not grant you the, you know, agency, like you said, that you would just come to that decision on your own.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit like, I mean, it's just a little bit frustrating, but like, honestly, like being a trans woman on the internet, like that's like, or just a trans woman in general. Cause like straight up, like, I was on TYT for a reason, right? Like I'm somebody, not that I'm proud of my military experience, but I was in the military, and that was like a whole thing about like it informed a lot of my takes about being against American imperialism and war, and like having like worked with drones and seen like the worst of it, and like like coming out as like a disabled person then with PTSD from that, and then like my experience in politics, my 4 degrees, like all of these things, like it kind of just does get erased being trans, because like the very moment you're like you've transed your gender, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a trans person that does the news, as opposed to like, no, this is somebody who does the news, has a ton of experience, and just happens to be trans. And like on that front, like the silliness of like, oh, Ben must have been pressured into this. The biggest thing that I did when I was working with drones in the military was like getting in arguments with literally all of my coworkers about like, hey, it's very uncool of all of you to be this bloodthirsty. Let's cool things down. Let's like stop, think about what's happening, figure out what's actually going on. And that was like literally one of the things that like disillusioned me from the military, from the United States in general, and was like part of my path to becoming like the evil communist that I am or whatever, was like, I got tricked into joining when I was 17. It's like, you're going to be this good guy doing good in the world, and we're going to be great. And then seeing it from my own eyes and being like, oh, this is horrible. You all are just straight up evil here. This is horrific. And then like, getting in arguments with coworkers about that all the time. So like, if I could hold my own while I was in the military, like, getting paperwork for arguing, with my supervisors as much as I did, like, I'm pretty sure that I could handle making a decision for myself career-wise later on in life as well, especially for something like this. Because, like, ultimately, my decision to leave the military was for moral reasons. I was like, I can't do it anymore. This is too much. This is, like, I cannot deal with, like, having to deal with, like, a workplace environment where, like, people are just, like, these bloodthirsty freaks, and I'm sitting here trying to save people's lives and failing, sadly. And, like, it's not the same, but also it's very similar in the way that this literally just does have a huge impact on people's lives. And like, I can't make it seem like, even if I'm pushing against transphobia with the content that I'm doing, even if I'm pushing against these right-wing narratives, at a certain level, like, there is limited usefulness in like being a part of the institution at all,
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good segue, Benny. Now that you've left the institution, multiples, I had no idea that you had served in the military. We'll have to have another chat about that someday, where we learn about the experiences you had, with the drone program. But I did want to give you a little bit of a floor here. Obviously, I was talking a little bit about this before you jumped on air. We were talking about how fucking impossible it is to, find work in media, and that obviously, this wasn't a decision that you took lightly, and that obviously you've got imagine big plans for yourself and your future. But I just wanted to give you the podium to let everybody know where you're going to be at, what you're going to be up to. Where can people find more Benny content?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, is this where I admit that I don't have big plans? Is this where like I mean, obviously I'm gonna keep doing
Fake it
what
till
I
you make
do.
it, Benny.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm gonna keep doing what I do on Twitch, right? I'll probably be like posting on my YouTube channel a bit more, and my Patreon. So it's Bennie Carollo on YouTube, Bleep Blomp Ben on Twitch. And then you can find a link to my Patreon from there. I'm really bad at shilling for myself. Like genuinely.
I'll shill for you,
like,
Benny. Go check out Benny shit right now. It's the best shit on Twitch. You've never seen anything like it. This woman is gonna be off the rails. You're gonna never ever see anyone like her. Now that she's been freed from the restrictions of TYT, it is going to be, quite a sight to behold.
yeah, exactly. No, but like, yeah, I don't really have like any big plans, which is like, that's one of those things that's kind of like, I guess, funny about this, because like, I mean, like, I'm kind of inevitably expecting the time that they're gonna make the claim that like I just did this for like the clout or whatever. Because like, straight up, this was like a big conversation I had with my partners, was like, look, I don't really have a plan. Like, I have my Twitch, and like I can focus more on that a little bit more. I've got some other things that I might be able to do, but like, I just can't keep doing what I'm doing because I'm taking too much psychic damage on like both ends from like the content that I covered with the breakdown, which was like so much of it was just focused on like transphobic nonsense, and then like, you know, having to like deal with like, you know, like the stuff that I was hearing from Cenk and Anna. Like it's just like, you know, it was kind of like, this was very much like a jumping off a cliff moment and like hoping that like my parachute opens type of situation. It wasn't like, oh, I've got this master plan or whatever, outside of just like, look, I think I'm going to be stable enough. Like my girlfriend's got my back, right? Like, you know, and like, I'll try to put in work where I can to like keep up with things. So like, you know, yeah, no big plan. I don't know. Follow me on Twitch. Check out my YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting an interview that I did earlier today about the politics of bimboism, which is really cool. Like, yeah, I don't know. I know how to be poor. I grew up really poor. I've lived in my car before.
No, yeah. Well, hopefully that's not in the future, Benny.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, like, I'm not a stranger to like just making a move and like doing what I think is the right thing to do.
Well, we're here for you, Benny. You've always got a permanent home here at the Vanguard. If you've got anything to plug or shout out, really appreciate you stopping by today. And you know, just good luck on this next chapter for yourself.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Benny, for stopping by. We'd love to chat again if you'd ever love to stop by. You're on the Vanguard whenever. Looks like our friend Adi the Bug Catcher enjoyed the conversation as well. So shout out to you, Adi. And yeah, thank you so much, Benny.
Yeah, thank you.